Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and today I'll be covering one of my favorite bands of all time, Hüsker Dü. Do you remember Hüsker Dü? Pioneers of college rock, hardcore icons, brilliant songwriters, expert musicians, and fans of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. This is the band that pretty much built the college radio audience and was instrumental in bringing underground music to the mainstream. They made the transition from light-speed hardcore to Beatlesque psychedelia, if the Beatles recorded their albums in a wind tunnel, in just 5 years. So please join me for a deep dive into Hüsker Dü. Love is all around. Before I get started, I just want to thank my newest patron, Johnny Reverb. You are the man. I really appreciate the support, and I got nothing but love for you. If you would like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon. It's at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And thanks. Hüsker Dü consisted of Bob Mould on guitar and vocals, Grant Hart on drums and vocals, and Greg Norton on bass and vocals. The band were blessed with two visionary songwriters, Bob and Grant, who would each sing whichever songs they wrote. The easy definition is that Bob wrote bitter-sounding hate songs, and Grant wrote sweet-sounding love songs. But that's too simple to be true. They were each capable of writing in a wide variety of styles and emotions. I myself am a Grant Hart man. That said, some of my all-time favorite Hüsker Dü songs are written by Bob. The creative competition and personality clashes between Bob and Grant were the fuel that drove the band. Don't think for a second, though, that one of them would slack off on a track simply because the other one wrote it. Some of Bob's most fiery guitar work is on Grant-penned tunes, and Grant laid down some of his tastiest fills on Bob's songs. As much as they wanted to contribute to and make that song great, I also think it was their way of putting their own stamp on the other guy's song. Hüsker Dü had an awful lot of talent for one band. And as a band, for a few years in the mid-80s, there was no one that played with as much energy, volume, and passion. The first single released by the band came out in 1981. Statues, a Grant Hart penned track, was the A-side, and Amusement, a Bob song, was on the B-side. Statues is very public image limited, as the band's post-punk sound here put Greg's bass way up front, while Bob's guitar scrapes, squeals, and shreds all over the rest of the recording. Its B-side, Amusement, is plain-spoken badassery, throwing shade at the lesser musical lights on the hardcore scene at the time. The band started as a hardcore band. Land Speed Record came out in January of 1982. This is, of course, a live album, and I don't usually cover live albums when I'm doing a deep dive on a band. But this seminal release by the band is essentially their debut album. Recorded as soon as the band got off a tour at a homecoming concert in Minneapolis in 1981, the band was tight as could be, and it's one of the most aggressive, fastest, loudest records you've ever heard in your life. This album came out on the band's own Reflex imprint through their friends the Minutemen's New Alliance label. Hüsker Dü's later label, SST, would get the rights to this album in 1987, and every subsequent pressing would be on SST. You know, people throw around the term blistering live set, but I don't think it's ever been used as fittingly as here. 17 songs in a little over 26 minutes. Do that math. Straight adrenaline pressed onto vinyl. This is hardcore era Hüsker Dü at their most pure. How fast is this record? Put this record on and then try to Shazam it. The songs are squeezed so tightly together, you're gonna get the phone book. This LP is not for everyone, and people who jumped on the Hüsker Dü bandwagon down the road probably won't like this. My favorite songs on side 1 are All Tensed Up, Guns at My School, Push the Button, Don't Have a Life, and MTC. I also unabashedly love a Don't Blink or You'll Miss It, Gilligan's Island. But this isn't the Gilligan's Island theme. This is a song about how they want to make it with Ginger and get the professor to make them drugs. The band does not talk to the audience in between songs, save for a Ramones-like 1, 2, 3, 4. And the drum intro before the band jump into Tired of Doing Things is what passes for a lighter moment on this LP. By the way, the lyrics to that song are simply, I'm tired of doing things your way, repeated 12 times. You're Naive is a fun antisocial blast from Bob with the lyrics, Here we go with politics. It's so fucked it makes me sick. He's a socialist, you're just thick. Grant's strange week is even more succinct. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 7 days. The album ender, Data Control, is probably my favorite track on this album. Grant Hart's Big Brother Meets IBM message is decades ahead of its time. Check it out. A multinational corporation, a stockholder's dream. A nightmare of diversity, a defense system so supreme. Too technical to talk about, too complex for layman's brains. It's enough to make you paranoid or drive you crazy losers sane. How amazing are those lyrics? It's just a reminder that underneath the sonic din, some next level things are going on. This is the perfect album to blast at full volume if you want to break your lease or meet all your fellow hardcore lovers in the neighborhood. In January of 1983, the band released Everything Falls Apart. Represented here, there was a period where I only bought my hardcore on cassettes. This is left over from that. Incidentally, if you want the early singles, they're available as a B-side on this album on both cassette and CD. So it's really good bang for your buck. Recorded for the band's own Reflex label and produced by SST's producer Spot, almost all of the songs here were written by Bob, with the exception of Wheels by Grant Hart. The punishing guitar of Opener From the Gut is the ideal way to kick off this gut punch of an album. Blah 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 is snotty perfection, not unlike what the Minutemen were up to at the time. Punch Drunk is a brilliantly succinct rebuke to the violence omnipresent at hardcore shows. The super short Bricklayer and its tale of a sniper using bricks instead of bullets really sums up hardcore Hüsker Dü at their most violent. Afraid of Being Wrong sees Bob taking passive people to task. Call me crazy, but I see their cover of Sunshine's Superman by Donovan as endearingly beautiful. Signals from Above seems to be an anti-hippie scree with fiery guitar work. The title track, Everything Falls Apart, shows traces of where the band would be going on future albums, and I love it. One of the slower songs on the album, which means a normally quick tempo, you can actually hear the melody, pairing a sunny melody with a darker lyric over Bob's most complex chord structure yet. Everything Falls Apart sticks out on this album in the best possible way. Wheels, the lone Grant song here, is a fun rocker about the dangers of the road with exceptional vocals, and the opening line showcases the cast-off nature of their lyrics back then. On a date with Sharon Tate, gonna pick her up in my new crate. Well, we go to the movies, we go to a drag. The highway patrol puts us both in a bag. I really love the strong finish to this album. My favorite track on the entire LP is Target. That gritty guitar tone is all I need. I also love the quintessential Bob track, Obnoxious. Grant's drumming on that track, by the way, is machine gun speed. And the lyrics, you don't like the way we look, obnoxious. You don't like the way we talk, obnoxious. You can all go get obnoxious. Gravity is a wonderful album closer with some of Bob's best riffage, and the production actually has beautiful separation. Hüsker Dü fans differ greatly on this album. Some see it as a minor work, others name it their favorite album. I think it's swell, and even if Hüsker Dü never evolved as a band past this stage, I'd still be a fan. In October of 1983, the band released Metal Circus. Incidentally, this album was also released as a 10-inch, which also sounds great. In my opinion, this EP signals the first appearance of the band's signature sound. Stepping out of the hardcore scene without sacrificing intensity, the band took the foot 1 inch off the gas pedal and delivered one of their most personal and effective albums. Album opener Real World is the first Bob Mould song that I absolutely love. The guitars alternate between aggressive and gorgeous, and it is his best vocal performance to date. And the lyrics still stand up today. I don't rape and I don't pillage other people's lives. I don't practice what you preach and I won't see through your eyes. That's 100% uncut badass Bob. It's Not Funny Anymore is a clever rejoinder against all those other bands that worshipped at the altar of the do, reminding them all to do their own thing. And the message is delivered in an ear-pleasing candy coating. Lifeline is a beautiful yet brutal song from Bob that forms a disturbing bookend with his alcohol-drenched First of the Last Calls. The Grant Hart-penned Diane is one of my favorite early Hüsker Dü songs. Years before Polly by Nirvana, Diane is told from the point of view of an evildoer and tells a chilling tale based on the real-life rape and murder of St. Paul local Diane Edwards in 1980. Diane falls somewhere between a love song and a eulogy. EP Ender, Out on a Limb, is a super underrated track in the band's catalog. It's a post-punk powerhouse that sounds like Hüsker Dü meets Killing Joke. With this EP, Hüsker Dü takes a major step forward in the evolution of their sound. In July of 1984, the band released Zen Arcade. Talk about a step forward. And I have to say, it just gets better every time you listen to it. For any of you that may have tried to get into it and simply couldn't, please stick with it. Once it hits, you'll be hooked. By this point, the band were writing excellent songs at an amazing clip, as evidenced by this double album. Quite frankly, the only comparison with the sheer number of high-quality songs that Hüsker Dü was churning out at the time would be The Clash from 1979 to 1981. By the way, this is the first appearance of individually credited songwriters, so the fierce rivalry between Mould and Hart was heating up. This album is widely seen as the band's masterpiece, and for that reason alone, I'm going to go a bit deeper on this one than I will any other. Supposedly, Zen Arcade is about a young man who dreams of killing himself after his girlfriend dies of a drug overdose, but instead he runs away from home, lands in a mental hospital, gets hired to design video games, and finally wakes up from his dream/nightmare, gets dressed, and goes to school. The album kicks off with Bob's Something I Learned Today, a torrid tune about the helpless dissatisfaction of youth, and does not let go for 23 songs. Grant's Never Talking to You Again is an acoustic masterpiece, made even more impressive by his tossed-off production style. This is followed up with Bob's overpowering Chartered Trips, where the song's subject dreams he's taking a bus out of town. Dreams Recurring is a backwards sound experiment that really adds a dreamy quality that helps hammer home the concept of the album. Indecision Time is an angry blast of conflicting emotions and confounding guitar. Hare Krishna is a rather odd tune, with the phrase Hare Krishna sung to the melody of I Want Candy over a Bo Diddley-style beat. Beyond the Threshold finds the young man out of his element in the dangerous big city. Grant absolutely kills it on drums here, by the way. Pride is a very curious song that I assume is using the word in its gay connotation. I'll Never Forget You is a sonic assault, with some of Bob's best guitar on the album, which is saying something. The Biggest Lie is an acid-tongued diss track about how even when you think you've made it, you haven't made it. My favorite part of the song is the backing vocals that go, back to your day job, back to your girlfriend, back to your hometown. Pretty harsh. We now begin a run of Grant Hart songs. What's Going On has perhaps my favorite opening line to any Hüsker Dü song. I was talking when I should have been listening. I only wish more people I met were that self-aware. The lyrics to Masochism World are pretty self-explanatory, so I'll just say it documents a love-hate relationship with pain. Standing by the Sea's gut-wrenching tale of loneliness and alienation has some of the unheralded Greg Norton's best bass work. Somewhere is a bittersweet song filled with hopefulness, with seriously psychedelic backwards tracking. Somewhere at its heart is a song about wish fulfillment and finding a safe, happy place. Here's my favorite verse from Somewhere. Searching for the truth, but all I ever find is lies. Trying to find identity, but I just find a disguise. Looking at the nightmare when I try to see the dream. Finding a reality as perfect as it seems. One Step at a Time is a sweet little interstitial track which tees up perhaps the best song on the whole double album, Grant Hart's Pink Turns to Blue. This is a harrowing song about a couple on heroin, and when the girlfriend ODs and her skin turns from pink to blue, the boyfriend doesn't know what to do. My favorite couplet is, no more rope and too much dope, she's lying on the bed. Angels pacing, gently placing roses round her head. Grant makes impossibly perfect lyrics like that seem effortless. Bob's politically minded newest industry tries to pick up the pieces after an apocalyptic war. The sweet piano interlude, Mondays Will Never Be the Same, sets the table well for whatever, which is my pick for Bob's best song on the album. And though this is a concept album, it's hard not to think that the lyrics of this song are somewhat autobiographical. Mom and Dad, I'm sorry. Mom and Dad, don't worry. I'm not the son you wanted, but what could you expect? I've made my world of happiness to combat your neglect. Very unguarded, vulnerable lyrics from Bob, which is a really nice surprise. The Tooth Fairy and the Princess, yes, that is its name, is an ear-catching backwards track that pulls off in 2 minutes and 43 seconds what Lou Reed's Metal Machine music couldn't do in an hour. Turn on the News is a gritty anthem that chastises people for sticking their heads in the sand when they should be out connecting with their fellow man. Sound familiar? Because we're living it every day. A real rabble-rouser of a track, Turn on the News features my favorite Bob solo on the entire album. The track Recurring Dreams ends this album the only way it can, with a long tour de force instrumental, which sees the band deliver an abrasive ending that's a lot closer to free jazz than it is to hardcore. The way they speed up at the end before finally crashing is so Hüsker Dü. Unlike most sprawling masterpieces from bands, this one doesn't peter out at the end. Hüsker Dü runs through the tape, and it finishes as strongly as it began. This is a perfect album for when you're in the mood for a novel, but you don't feel like reading. In January of 1985, the band released New Day Rising. This cover shot was taken at Hidden Beach in Cedar Lake. I have a soft spot for this album because this is the album that got me into Hüsker Dü. I shoplifted it on cassette from a wildly overpriced record store. Don't judge me. What part of wildly overpriced didn't you understand? I already had SST's Blasting Concept cassette, which is where I first heard Hüsker Dü, but this was a revelation. Title track New Day Rising kicks off this LP with one of Bob's most relentless guitar attacks. And if this song doesn't get you amped up for the awesomeness to come, you might want to start pricing defibrillators. Grant's Girl Who Lives on Heaven Hill is a fun shout-along track that is way more than it seems once you realize that Heaven Hill is actually a brand of cheap bourbon. And check out Greg's down and dirty bass work on this track. I Apologize is a brilliant bit of songcraft from Bob. Folklore is my favorite Bob vocal performance on the whole LP. He is absolutely crazed on the chorus, and he and Grant blend their two voices almost like they're fighting for supremacy of the track. Grant's drumming and Bob's guitar work on If I Told You is virtuoso territory. Celebrated Summer is a 4-minute epic that creates two separate yet equally brilliant nostalgic moods. But it's a few of the songs on side 2 that really make me love this album. Terms of Psychic Warfare and its infectious bassline is my second favorite song on this album. Grant's songwriting and his vocal performance are exceptional, but Bob really distinguishes himself with both his backing vocals and his guitar work. 59 Times the Pain is a brutal ode to self-hatred, with vocals that seem like Bob plugged his mic right into the soundboard. Powerline's lyrics are pretty cool, but the music is next level great. The harmonics that Greg is getting on his bass, combined with Bob's sheets of guitar over Grant's rock-solid drumming, form a perfect concoction. Now my favorite song on this album, Books About UFOs, is one of the prettiest songs Hüsker Dü ever did. A straight-up love song about Grant's affinity for an offbeat girl obsessed with outer space. Books About UFOs really set the hook for me with this band. The undeniable rocker I Don't Know What You're Talking About has the power of their hardcore years, but it's tamed just enough to appeal to rock fans of all stripes. Album ender Plans I Make is one of my favorite Bob songs on the album, with a raunchy guitar tone that thrashes relentlessly until it finally self-destructs. Such a tight band. This is the ideal Hüsker Dü album for when you're mad as hell and you're not going to take it anymore. In September of 1985, the band released Flip Your Wig. This album came out the same year as New Day Rising. That's how prolific this band was. Flip Your Wig is a delightful slice of college radio cocaine that I defy non-Hüsker Dü fans not to like. This was recorded and released at a time when the major labels were sniffing around the band. And in fact, the band already had this album recorded when they were talking to major label Warner Brothers. But they had felt that they owed it to SST, for some reason, to give them the album. This album saved SST Records and kept them solvent for years. Warner Brothers, who just signed the band, were beside themselves that they missed out on releasing this album. And you'll know why when you hear the songs Flip Your Wig, Everything, Makes No Sense at All, Hate Paper Doll, and Green Eyes, all back to back. This album is perhaps Hüsker Dü's most fun album. Bob's vocals had come a long way since the first album, and he was just getting better and better. My favorite Grant songs on this album are Green Eyes and Flexible Flyer. The first is a haunting love song with sizzling production. The second, an ode to adolescent freedom that walks the line between melancholia and whimsy, whose snapshot lyrics of childhood and adulthood remind us to enjoy the ride before times, places, and situations put us in an early grave. Find Me is the kind of forward-thinking track that you wouldn't hear again until Radiohead started making music. Bob's Makes No Sense at All sounds like the hit it should have been, and is my pick for most accessible song Bob ever wrote. Aside from that, Makes No Sense at All has Grant's best drumming on the album. Divide and Conquer proved that Bob could be more melodic without losing any of his edge. And believe it or not, the song seems to presage both the internet and the Patriot Act. Instrumentals, The Wit and the Wisdom, and Don't Know Yet finish off the album with a dirge and a drone respectively, allowing you to savor all of the genius lyrics that came before them. This is the perfect Hüsker Dü album for a Friday night when you just got paid, before you go party hunting with Johnny Kemp. What Hüsker Dü fan is going to get that? In March of 1986, the band released Candy Apple Grey. The band signed to major label Warner Brothers, who gave the band complete artistic control, including the right to put out this absolutely hideous cover. As off-putting and abrasive as Flip Your Wig's cake top design was sweet and inviting. The Replacements had already signed to a major, but they didn't get nearly as much crap from their fans as Hüsker Dü. Mostly because by the time they signed to a major, the Mats had already moved far beyond the DIY hardcore scene, while Hüsker Dü basically was that scene. Crystal is an abrasive opener from Bob, which seems to be about the effects of crystal meth. That's followed by Grant's brilliant Don't Want to Know If You Were Lonely, a song that spins post-breakup awkwardness into angst-ridden gold. I Don't Know For Sure is a rave-up about the surprising nature of life. Sorry Somehow is another great Grant breakup tune, this time about a messy divorce. And it's practically a clinic on lyric writing. Time heals, time goes on, and time really flies. Time hurts, and time can cut you down to size. There's no need to touch you now. No, I'm doing fine. Life too can cut you, and I've cut you out of mine. Come on, dog. Those lyrics are crazy. That's how you write a song. Too Far Down is perhaps Bob's darkest song. But once you get past its calamitous opening, it's such a strong acoustic performance that is practically uplifting. Here's something you might not expect from me, being a Grant Hart man. Hardly Getting Over It is one of my all-time favorite Hüsker Dü songs. It's top 5. You know what? I'm going to give you my favorite Hüsker Dü songs in the description below, so check that out. Hardly Getting Over It is one of the band's longest songs, and it's one of their slowest songs as well. Nevertheless, it is one of their most intense and effective songs, and it's my pick for best Bob vocal on this album. Its refrain, Hardly Getting Over It, hardly getting used to getting by, is a fitting lament on the inevitability of death. Eiffel Tower High is my kind of drug song, with one of the band's most cohesive musical performances, and its chorus/outro is one of my favorites on the album. This LP is one hell of a statement. The band wanted a lot of people to like this, but they were self-conscious about it. Equally angry and hopeful. This album is the sonic equivalent of a Sour Patch Kid, abrasive and distant on the first listen, but becoming warmer and sweeter the more you play it. In January of 1987, the band released Warehouse, Songs and Stories. When Bob announced he wanted 11 tracks on their newest album, Grant pushed back, stating he wanted close to that amount himself, so this wound up being a double album, with 11 of Bob's songs and 9 of Grant's. The back cover shows the band on the grass in the garden at Lakewood Cemetery, and it accurately captures the kinder, gentler Hüsker Dü that you hear on this album. The band's journey to neo-psychedelia is now complete. This was their last album for Warner Brothers. The band actually promoted the hell out of it, winding up even on The Late Show with Joan Rivers, as well as an episode of The Today Show. With this album, the band get as close as they ever would to making a radio station's AOR playlist. I'm just going to run down some of my favorites. These Are Your Important Years, walks the line between world-weary life lesson and high school prom theme. You Left Me Standing in the Rain is a rocking guitar tune about a guy who gets stood up. Back From Somewhere is one of my favorite Grant songs on this album, and the perfect companion piece to Bob's You Left Me Standing in the Rain, almost coming across as the other person's point of view in that song. And I love the music to Back From Somewhere, as once they get to the third verse, the band begins slowing the song down, and effectively hammers home the feeling of the song. Ice Cold Ice is a kick-ass tune about the shutting down of all emotions, simply in order to fit in. You're a Soldier is one of Grant's most infectious and relentless musical compositions, I think the track Could You Be the One is Bob's personality crisis. I feel it's an underrated song that doesn't get enough credit because its lyrics are so simple that people mistake them for being simplistic. Could you be the one they talk about, hiding inside behind another door? Is it only happiness you want? Does wanting a feeling matter anymore? It doesn't mean that much to me. Sometimes I don't mean that much to you, and I don't even know what I'm hiding for. You think it's easy writing lyrics that conversational? Try it sometime. Too Much Spice is a killer song musically. It features what I think is Bob's most arresting guitar solo on the whole album. Lyrically, it seems to detail the pitfalls of success, everything from groupies to money to heroin. She Floated Away has always hit my ear as a sort of psychedelic sea shanty. It's always hard for me not to see Bob's Friend, You've Got to Fall as being about Grant Hart. From the lines, I can see your hollowed eyes, to the way you live, your life's a crime, it seems to document Grant's drug addiction, as well as Bob's defense of himself in the lines, there's nothing wrong with having aspirations, nothing wrong with walking tall, as he tried to keep the band moving towards success. Grant Hart's Tell You Why Tomorrow is probably my favorite song on this album, and seems like it was built up stream of consciousness-wise. With cryptic lyrics and sinister music, there's an ominous tone to this track that I've always loved. Album ender You Can Live at Home seems to give a window into Grant's domestic situation, since he still lived in his childhood home, where he could clear his head, lick his wounds, and escape the BS of the music biz. Some see it as an anti-Bob song. They see it as Grant telling his sullen bandmate that if he's so unhappy trying to make it in the real world, why doesn't he just move home? Following this album, the band broke up. This album was a hell of a farewell for the band, and it really would have been exciting seeing where they went next, together. This album is perfect to listen to while you reorganize your record collection while drinking jet fuel. I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of my all-time favorite Grant Hart songs, 2541. This was released just after the band broke up in 1988. As far as I'm concerned, though it was released by Grant solo, this is the last great Hüsker Dü song, because he must have written it while the band were still together. And it really sounds to me like something that could have been on Metal Circus. The number has a double meaning in that 2541 was a house address that Grant used for sexual hookups, but 2541 Nicollet Avenue was also the band's work address. Both locations had big windows to let in the sun. And if you enjoy the side of Hüsker Dü that you heard in the songs Diane and Never Talking to You, check out 2541. I really think you're going to enjoy it. Following the breakup of the band, Grant Hart put out albums both solo and with the Nova Mob. Bob Mould put out records both solo and with Sugar. Grant passed away a few years ago, unfortunately. Bob is still out there doing it, and Greg Norton is still out playing with a lot of different bands as well. There was a set put out by Numero group Savage Young Do, which is a treasure trove if you want to delve into the early years of the band. If you just want to dip your toe in the water and see if you like Hüsker Dü, I highly recommend Metal Circus and Flip Your Wig. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive on Hüsker Dü. If you did, please do me a favor and click the like button. And don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.